Hey, sports fans, it's world champion handicapper Mike North. Punch this number in your phone right now. If you're driving, pull over. 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419 for a free pick and info for the premier handicapping site in the country, VegasScoresAndOdds.com. It's the only site you'll ever need with expert handicappers like John Anthony, Denny Macklin, Tony Sacco, Ray Monahan, yours truly, and many more. Check out the homepage of VegasScoresAndOdds.com for a tote board with your buddy. Follow Vegas Scores and Odds on Twitter and dial up 1-800-808-3419. It's 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419, or go to VegasScoresAndOdds.com.
The following program is suitable for all ages.
Buffone. A certain magic will always linger with the very name. It speaks of courage and fervor and the world's most brutal game. 55, worn by Doug Buffone, a Chicago Bear through and through. He demanded excellence of himself and anyone wearing navy blue.
You tell me what's going on. This is moronic. We're going to get our whipped all the way down the line. I want somebody to get kicked in the and get out there and play. You're getting paid to play this game. I'm playing right. I don't mind you getting beat. I got my whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me. You are a professional team. Act like one, for God's sakes.
Football fans, this is Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach to Chicago Bears football analysis. I'm your host, John Buffone, coming to you live Tuesday night, October 8th on our Mixlr.com channel. My special guest tonight is Jason Goff, host of several shows, including Spain and Company, Big Ten This Morning, and Fox 32's The Final Word on Sunday nights. He'll join us in just a bit, but first, I want to welcome my producer and moderator, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, before we get started, how you coping with the Bears' loss in London?
Whatever I was expecting, that was not what I imagined would happen. And I mean, having to sit on this loss for 2 weeks, that's not how you want to go on the bye week. So, you know, after last week against the Vikings, it's like the complete opposite end of the spectrum here. Like, it's, you know, not a good feeling.
No, and, you know, you kind of have to dwell on this for 2 weeks, but if they were ever going to need a bye week, I'm glad it's this week because there's a lot of self-assessment that has to be done at Hallis Hall, and they better start figuring some things out. Before we get started, Alyssa, can you set the table for our listeners? Tell them what's ahead.
Indeed. Before we bring in our guest, we do our B55 segment and then do another one after our guest interview. Now, these B55 segments are when I ask John 5 questions, and for each of them, he has 55 seconds to respond. That's John's way of dedicating this show to Doug Buffone, his uncle, who played 15 seasons for the Chicago Bears and wore number 55. Now, along the way, those of you joining us live, please post your comments and questions in the chat room, and I will try to work them into the show. So, John, let's get the first 5 in the books, and then we'll bring in Jason.
Let's do it.
So, the Bears defense came into the game allowing 61 yards per game. Against the Raiders on Sunday, they allowed over 100 more yards rushing than their average, with 169. Diagnose for us what went wrong. Your 55 seconds start now.
I'll just start with everything and work my way down. They got gashed by the Raiders' offensive line and rookie running back Josh Jacobs. I'm not going to try to X and O the hell out of this one. They just got manhandled. Some of Jacobs' more effective runs were right at Khalil Mack. Now, obviously, they chipped and they pulled guards and did all that fun stuff, but they tried to neutralize Mack by running right at him, and at times, that worked with great success. Also, can we talk about the tackling? Was there some kind of English anti-tackling curse put on the Bears by a troll on Piccadilly Circus? They were sliding off guys like they were covered in Vaseline. Clinton Dix literally put his head down and just like threw his body at Josh Jacobs on a pitch play and almost didn't even make contact. Obviously, losing Hakeem Hicks was big. Not having Nichols was big. I raved about the depth of this squad last week, so I'm not going to flip-flop on that. But it's not crazy to think that losing 2 key guys on the line wasn't going to have any kind of effect. But using the eye test, they got blown off the line, which I didn't think was possible with this defense.
Going back to that tackling, that was atrocious. It kind of reminded me of, you know, the Giants and the Dolphins game last year. It's just it feels like these losses that they're very similar. And let's just hope that, after this bye week that they can come out against the Saints and pull one out.
That better not be a trend.
Please not. So going on to the other side of the ball, the Bears' rushing game is suffering, unlike the Raiders. Their season average of 3.4 yards per carry is 29th in the NFL. David Montgomery carried the ball 11 times for only 25 yards against the Raiders. The team as a whole had 42 yards total. What's wrong, John? And more importantly, how does the coaching staff fix this problem? 55 seconds, John, anytime.
Well, it looks like a combination of things. I think we can all agree that his offensive line went from being considered a formidable unit to an underachieving, porous piece of Swiss cheese. It doesn't help that defenses are stacking the box because they don't have much faith in Chase Daniel beating them or Mitch Trubisky beating them for that matter. The most a Bears quarterback has thrown for this season is 231 yards. They're only averaging 8.2 yards per completion, and only the Jets are worse than that, and I think they're starting an insurance salesman at quarterback right now. But I'm playing. I love you, Luke Falk. But all of that being said and accounted for, Montgomery's not getting the carries either. He only has over 20 carries in one game. 6 to open the season, 18 against Denver, 13 against Washington. He did have 21 against the Vikings, but last week when they could have used a good, solid running attack, he gets 11 carries. So pick your reason why the running game isn't working. Like, if the line isn't playing poorly, the lack of production in the passing game, the lack of carries and opportunities, whichever one you pick, I'm not going to say you're wrong because there is a plethora of things wrong with this offense right now.
And I think going to the offensive line, I feel like Matt Nagy really, you could sense the frustration that he has in the line, especially in terms of the run game. So that's something that him and the staff are going to have to hopefully find a solution to, or at least try to get to that point.
Harry Hyacinth has his hands full right now.
So how also does the coaching staff fix the penalty problem that's inflicting this team? They are currently the 6th most penalized team in football, and Charles Leno is the most penalized player in the league. 55 seconds, John, and remember, no delay of game.
Well, penalties are the most frustrating thing in the NFL right now. I'm almost to the point where I'm surprised that there isn't a flag thrown on any impactful play. But how do you fix it? Well, I'll be honest. If I knew exactly how to do that, I don't know if I'd be talking to you right now, Alyssa. I might have a different position at Alice Hall. But they had 10 penalties against the Raiders. That's the second time they've had a 10-penalty game. They had one against the Packers in the opener. They have 11 holding calls overall, well above the league average. 4 of them are on Charles Leno. But getting back to how you fix that, I don't know, because holding calls aren't exactly a discipline thing. False starts, jumping off sides, delay of games, those are timing and discipline issues you can sometimes remedy with reps. Holding, both offensive and defensive, are sometimes just the product of getting beat. We're in week 6 now, so how much more are these players really going to develop at this point? I know we talked about penalties a couple weeks ago, and I said, you know what? Talk to me into a few games, and if there's still a problem with it, then we can be concerned. Well, it's still a problem, and I'm getting more concerned.
I feel like this bye week is coming at the perfect time, not just because of injuries, but also so these players can kind of just take a step back to regroup, because they really, after 5 weeks, especially on offense, they really need that time to just kind of get back on track.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need a mental recharge.
Absolutely. So John, my colleague over at BearsWire.com, Lauren Cox, writes a feature every week where he identifies studs and duds from the previous game. We've already addressed the negatives in the first 3 questions, so give me some studs from Sunday's game. I'll start the clock when you start to talk.
Well, through all this turmoil and uncertainty, Allen Robinson has shined this year. Another great game, 7 receptions for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. When he's healthy, Robinson can be a top 10 receiver. He catches everything thrown his way. Even when Chase or Trubisky don't hit him in stride, he can make that awkward catch where, he kind of contorts his body and still finds a way to come up with it. He's obviously the number 1 option. Now, that could be a product of the Bears passing game really not spreading it around. But Robinson, in 2 years removed from that ACL issue, is showing why the Bears paid him. In 13 games last year, 55 receptions and 4 touchdowns. Through 5 games this year, 31 receptions and 2 touchdowns. He's on track to kind of creep up on that 100 reception mark. Go figure, when Robinson starts to emerge, the rest of the offense takes a step back. How Bears of a move is that? That just is on brand. But another stud, I'll shout out Danny Trevathan. I consistently say he's the underappreciated heart of the defense. Had an 11 tackle game. That's the most he's had this season. Another really solid performance by the middle linebacker.
Also got to give a shout out to the special teams too. Pat O'Donnell's having an amazing year. I know Eddie Pinheiro didn't get to kick any field goals. I mean, I feel like he really wanted that field goal at the end there to tie his former team. But the special teams, surprisingly, are doing really well this year.
Patty O'Donnell having a year at the punting position. I'll give him a shout out.
So, John, for the final question of our first half of our B55 questions, I want to stay on the stud theme and ask you to identify your studs through the first 5 games of this 3-2 team. You know the routine. Go.
Well, I think I already made my case for Allen Robinson, so I won't dig too much deeper onto that, but obviously he's on that list. Offensively, he might be the only stud to this point. We'll see how things play out with Montgomery, Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller, etc. The jury's still out. Defensively, there are a lot of studs. I mean, I said it last week. We kind of gloss over Khalil Mack's brilliance because we take it for granted, or at least it's been normalized. But there's no doubt that Khalil Mack has made a strong case for being the best defensive player in the league. 4.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and a constant disruptor. I talked about Trevathan, leads the team in tackles with 44 total. Also, I think Nick Williams and Roy Robertson-Harris have stepped up greatly and made their presence known. Williams with 4.5 tackles for loss and Double RH with 3.5. I like a lot of what I've seen out of those two guys. And you know what? I am going to shout out Eddie Pinheiro. 8 for 9 in field goals this year, 2 for 2 from beyond 50 yards, playing through an injury. That's kind of a weird situation. A perfect 9 for 9 in extra points, which aren't gimmies anymore. Eddie Pinheiro becoming a stabilizing force in the kicking game. Love to see it. With that said, I'm going to bring on my guest for tonight. I now welcome Jason Goff, host of Spain and Company Big Ten This Morning and Fox 32's The Final Word on Sunday night. He's also has a special connection to this show because he worked alongside my Uncle Doug for many years. Jason, welcome to the show. How you doing?
John, Allie, thank you for having me. Always good, man. How's everybody?
We're a little down in the dumps, but on this show we keep the energy level up. So that's what we're going to try to do. Now, Jason, I know you went over to London for the game. Outside of that, performance, can you tell me what the experience was like being across the pond covering an NFL game?
It's one of the better vacations I've had, just because I don't get a chance to take them anymore. So, starting with that, but. The flight was cool. I mean, I thought it was going to be a little anxiety filled for me because I don't do well on long flights as of late. But I slept through the flight. Everything was good. We touched down in London. People could not have been better. I've never seen so many people. You kind of get in the echo chamber of your own city, wherever you're from, when you're rooting for an NFL team. But I've never seen so many people who didn't really have the connection to a team, but still rooted for a team like I saw in London. I ran into Bears fans from Sweden, ran into Bears fans from Denmark. We ran into a whole slew of Bears fans from London as well. And it was, you had to check and see for an accent, after you said bear down, because one thing, everybody was, in their orange and blue, but everyone who said bear down, you had to make sure that they were from America. And if not, you couldn't really get down with them in terms of, some of the same things that we're used to, because a lot of them were introduced to Bears football in 1985. So there are a lot of people over there who still reference the fridge and Walter Payton and all those things, but watch the games on a weekly basis because that was their entry point. So it was really cool to see the history of a team be appreciated, especially in these days and times where if you're locally covering it, or if you're covering it on a show like this, where you get so caught up in the week to week and the season to season, sometimes the pageantry and the history gets lost. But it wasn't lost on me how much people do love the Bears all around the world. So it was an excellent experience, and I appreciate it from top to bottom.
Now, do you think that there is long sustainability in the UK for a team? Because we talked about this last week, whether or not, like you said, the pageantry or the luster or the novelty would wear off if a team would go over there full time. Do you think it would work over there if you stationed a team over there?
The travel obviously would be hard, but you can see. They tried this with Mexico City, and they continue to try it because it's still a viable option in terms of revenue. But you see how it's ramped up from one game a year. They're going to play 4 games over there because there's a need for it, and there's a thirst for that kind of action. And the people over there aren't. It's not like they're not educated about American football either. Like, there were no signs, there were no things on the Jumbotron telling people when to cheer, when penalties went against the Bears, and you could see it immediately. Like, guys who were British dudes jumping up, screaming, holding, and throwing stuff the same way we would. So it wasn't like I've seen an expansion. I remember when the Orlando Magic debuted in the NBA, and they had to be told, what was not what was traveling, but how to respond and how to, those kinds of things. They believe in football over there. Obviously, soccer is the dominant sport, but I think there are a lot of people over there who are wanting for NFL football. And there are a lot of people over there who are, from the States, who work over there or who travel over there, who live over there part-time. I talked to one guy who lives there 3/4 of the year, but he lives in Chicago as well. So I'm sure a guy like that would love to have a team over there. And there was a lot of different jerseys. It was kind of like a cosplay kind of wild out, vibe where there were Jaguars jerseys and Giants jerseys and Vikings jerseys for the Bears-Raiders game. So the tailgate was outstanding because there was a bar row that they planted the stadium right in the middle of. So, there's like 5 or 6 bars. There was a Bears bar that we stopped at where, I hung out with Zach Miller and Charles Tillman for a little bit 2 nights before the game. The next day after that, the Raiders bar was open. We walked through there with, our Bears colors because we're not the best of guys, but, we were kind of rubbing it in and it was fun. We got some fun, lighthearted ribbing, but I think 15, 20 years from now, I think it'll be a realistic venture for us to see some form of NFL football over there, if not 4 times a year, once a week, because I think that's how thirsty they are for it over there. And the reception was amazing, and everybody did a great job in terms of understanding the game and what surrounds it as well.
Sounds like a heck of an experience. We're talking to Jason Goff here on Buffone 55. You heard my thoughts on what's happening with the Bears' run game. What's your opinion of what's ailing this rushing attack? Obviously, David Montgomery not getting the numbers that the Bears thought that he would.
Well, I mean, there really isn't a discipline. Running the football is a discipline. It can't be a fallback. And once you treat it like a fallback, you're going to be disappointed with the results you get, and therefore you're not going to do it as much. It's happened in Detroit for 7-8 years now since they drafted Matt Stafford. I mean, Javid Best was a workhorse. Amir Abdullah was a guy who could run the football a little bit, but if you don't have a guy in there, one, that's going to be consistent enough, and two, don't have a consistent enough play calling in terms of a stick-to-itiveness when it comes to the running game, you can't just flip on a run game light switch. That has to be practiced. That has to be disciplined. That has to be understood. There's a certain fatigue that goes into it as well. Can you run the ball when you're tired as well as the defense is tired as well? I mean, when we see these 80-yard drives and 70-yard drives, we see a lot of people stalling out in between the 10s. Forget the 20s. The real green zone is in between the 10s because the field is shrunk. There's a lot less room to operate, and you can run as many slants and run as many pick plays as you want. But in the end, can your fat guys push my fat guys around? And that's exactly what happened in the Bears-Raiders game. You had one team that was prepared to push around, and you had another team that was on roller skates. So I don't think that it's on David Montgomery. And also, last year I think that this team had a false sense of security because of the lack of injuries and because of how terrifically that defense played. I've never been a huge fan of Charles Leno Jr. When he got his extension, I was surprised. Robert Massey, I didn't think he was going to be a part of this situation after the first year. He still is the right tackle. Kyle Long, it's devastating to see what's happened to Kyle Long because he can't play as consistently as he'd like to play. So these are all the things that go into a run game. Kyle Long, to me, the story of his Bears career, I think is similar to that of Tommy Harris, where you had a phenomenal start, but you knew at some point injuries would take over, and they have seemingly for Kyle Long, whether it's the ankle, whether it's the bad shoulder or the neck surgeries. I know he wouldn't blame these things on any of his play, but in the end, even on the good plays, go back and watch the Bears scoring plays and when they are in close. Kyle Long was being pushed backwards on many of those plays. Even the David Montgomery big collision at the goal line that set up the touchdown, Kyle Long was in the backfield. That happened quite often. Chase Daniels interception where everybody's like, what is he looking at? Forget what he's looking at. He had Kyle Long in his lap too. So these are the things where you look at that offensive line. From a play calling and discipline standpoint, you can't mess around and just try to flip the switch on the running game. And two, from a performance standpoint, I think the Bears covered up a lot of mistakes in a charmed year, and they fooled themselves into thinking that everything was okay. Cody Whitehair is your best offensive lineman. Why Cody Whitehair isn't your center? Because you wanted to make way for James Daniels because maybe he's not as good at guard. I think you worsened yourself at 2 different positions. So, I mean, I have hopes for those two guys especially, but for the other 3 that I named, and unfortunately for Kyle Long, I think his best days are behind him. I think if he can't maul you, if it comes down to technique and fundamentals, I think a really, really strong pass rusher or a really good guy. Like Maurice Hurst is a decent defensive tackle. Maurice Hurst had a Pro Bowl type of day. That shouldn't happen against a Pro Bowler like Kyle Long. So I think I think there's going to have to be some back to the drawing board, but you don't have a full training camp to take your running game back to the lab. So now what has to happen is you're not going to employ a fullback. You're not going to employ a blocking tight end. Adam Shaheen isn't out there as much as he should be for, what you feel like he only can do, which is block. So I think they're going to have to, these gadget plays, these trick plays, these jet sweeps, all these things, you're going to be very angry because if these games are close, those are the plays that are going to have to come out inside the 10. And more times than not, those plays when a defense can go sideline to sideline instead of north and south, those are the plays that are going to get you beat. So this team's going to have to score on defense, or they're going to have to score so many points on offense that they don't have to worry about a run game, because I don't see a consistent enough effort in terms of a discipline in it, or I don't see the raw materials so far on the offensive line to push people around.
I want to talk about the guy calling the plays. Do you think John Gruden outcoached Matt Nagy on Sunday? And what's your overall assessment of Nagy's work through 5 games this year?
I think he had a better game than he did Sunday. John Gruden got the ball out of Derek Carr's hands often and early, 2 seconds or less. There really weren't any 5 or 7 step dropbacks. They neutralized Khalil Mack for the most part. Khalil got a hit on Derek Carr, which was kind of cool because Derek popped up and, they were really close friends in Oakland. So they, kind of slapped each other on the head. But it wasn't a lot that you heard out of Khalil. Khalil had the fumble recovery as well, but they did a good enough job in neutralizing the Bears' best player on the team, period. The most money got, he went without a huge impact on the game outside of the fumble recovery. So I think they did a good enough job there. And as far as Matt Nagy is concerned, I'm not willing to throw him away, but there were things when they were winning that I was hesitant about in terms of how cute they get sometimes. And, can you just line up and beat the snot out of? There's going to be games, there's playoff games, there's regular season games where I'm not going to be able to score 31. And there's going to be games where your defense doesn't travel. There's going to be games where you make mistakes on the punt team. Can I just beat you because not just out scheming you because I'm tougher than you? And right now, their explosive run rate, 3% of their runs are getting 10 yards or more. That's 31st in the league. Their yards per play, 4.5 a game. That's 30th in the league. Their explosive play rate, 5% of their plays are 10 yards or more. That's 30th in the league. Their points per drive was 144. That's 29th in the league. Their explosive pass rate, 6%. That's 28th in the league. Their efficiency is 10.6%. That's 26th in the league. So right now, we're talking about, and my man Joe Ostrowski put those numbers out there today, we're talking about offenses akin to the Jets and the Dolphins and the Redskins, who we are all talking about making coaching changes or have made a coaching change at some point. Not saying that's going to happen to Matt Nagy. All I'm saying is they are not in good company right now for the side of the football that is supposed to be as explosive as it is. When Lovie Smith was the coach, if the defense wasn't right, everybody looked at Lovie Smith and said, what the hell's going on? I think the same thing is getting ready to happen if it hasn't already happened with Matt Nagy. And the problem is it doesn't matter whether it's Chase Daniel or Mitchell Trubisky in there. This offense from game 1 has not looked like it was supposed to look. Now, if there's judgment and error in terms of travel or, maybe the second year being a year that we thought that this thing should take off, which, we talked about football, offense 101 when he first presented himself at the press conference and, not practicing during the preseason. All those things were in his favor last year. Now this year we're talking about a 3-2 team where we had a lot more expectations for him, and now people are kind of backsliding. I can understand it. I'm not willing to throw Matt Nagy out. This is that thing where you find out what you got in a coach. Everybody loves living, in the penthouse and on the regular living room floor, but in any relationship, you got to find out what somebody's basement is and find out if you can live there, because you're gonna figure yourself out. Sometimes you're not gonna always get along with the significant other. You got to find out if you can live in that basement. And right now, Bears fans are trying to figure out, how does Matt Nagy get them out of this offensive basement?
Another guy Bears fans are trying to figure out if they're still in love with is Mitchell Trubisky. We asked this. This is one of the most polarizing guys in Chicago sports.
What's your take, John?
Yeah, come on, man. We got to ask you, is this going to be the guy? Is this the dude?
No, I'm not talking about just you. I'm talking about period. As a Bears fan, I'm not doing this again. I did this with Cutler. We did this with Grossman and Orton. Hell, I did this back in the day with Harbaugh and Tomczak back.
Cade McNown, man, and that's another one.
And God bless. And I wouldn't, your uncle, you know how much he meant to me.
Yeah.
And anytime I can do anything for a Buffone or around or with a Buffone, I'm highly honored to do so. And having a chance to work with that man for as long as I did, them damn quarterbacks took lives out of, took years off my man's life too. So I'm not going to do this with this Mitchell Trubisky thing. What's so crazy, John? I messed around and was all about Mitch his rookie year. I was like, take the handcuffs off. I want to see what he is. You trade up, second pick. I'm tired. The Ravens game was the Ravens game that year was the epitome of football hell for me because they threw the ball like 10, 11 times. They ran it like 40 into a brick wall. I'm like, no, this is not how you treat a number 2 overall pick at the quarterback position. Let him sling it. Let's find out what that basement is. And then last year, when he got himself an offensive coach and he wasn't under the watch of John Fox, maybe you thought it was the Jeff Fisher vibes where when a quarterback isn't around that kind of guy, maybe he flourishes. All right, so last year there were some games where I was like, I don't know about that throw. I don't know about this throw. And immediately Bears fans have aligned themselves in these two gangs of pro Mitch or the Mitch that you have to be against or bad Mitch. And I've let the results do the talking, man. He has a ways to go. And now it's building. See, this is the thing. We're going to find out what Mitchell Trubisky is made of because the happy-go-lucky all-American boy and just all about football, that pressure is a mother. And we're going to find out when he comes back. No, there is no grace period. There is no honeymoon. Who knows what this run with Chase Daniel is going to be like if he comes back in time to save this season. I don't know what the season is going to look like. But if he comes back and his team is a couple of games or a game above 500, there will be no reintroduction or acclimation period. We're going to expect him to get right back in. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but this is the business, especially when you've got, Deshaun Watson throwing for 4 touchdowns and 367 yards. When you've got Pat Mahomes looking like Dan Marino in the flesh outside of the Indianapolis game. I know, don't get me wrong. That wasn't a great look for the Chiefs offense, but especially when you've got those two guys who essentially Ryan Pace said in that draft and in that move up one spot that this guy is going to be better not only than everybody in this draft, but the year after as well with Darnold and Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen and all those guys. He said of the next 8 quarterbacks coming out, and maybe the future as well, Tua and Trevor Lawrence, all those guys, because if you're any kind of general manager, any kind of player personnel guy, those guys are going to be on your board regardless. You know what's happening 2-3 years out. That's why the Dolphins are doing what they're doing to try to get Alabama's quarterback. That's why some of these teams like the Bengals don't really want to win this year and definitely don't want to win next year so they could draft a guy like Trevor Lawrence. So what Ryan Pace did was tell everyone that Mitchell Trubisky is better than the next 3 years of quarterbacks. Now, what has happened? Mitchell Trubisky is maybe out of the 10 guys that I named in that 7, 8, 9 range where you can't have it. You can't have it. So do I think he is going to be what they thought he would be? No. Do I think he's bad? I don't know. Do I think he's okay? I think he's okay more times than not. Can an okay quarterback win in this league? Not for any sustained period of time. So Mitchell Trubisky has a crash course, and it started last year, and it got off to a really good start. And there were a few games where like, see, like the Cody Parkey thing bothers me too, because I'm sorry, man, you didn't have to get held to 14 points, right? I mean, you didn't need to put it in the kicker's hands or leg, in that way. You could have scored on the Philadelphia Eagles defense in the playoff game. Now, the throws that we saw at the end of the game, were like, wow, look at that throw. But, you could do that in the first and second quarter too, right? So these are the things where, I try to put my objective hat on as a Bears fan who's seen a whole bunch of bad play at that position, but there's always something in the back of your mind like, uh-oh. The uh-ohs come around, especially when you see teams like the Packers go from Favre to Rodgers, or you see, Drew Brees, who this offense and this team is kind of built after because of Ryan Pace's time in New Orleans. He drafted the big tight end. He wanted a big, fast tight end. Adam Shaheen, that hasn't worked out. I mean, you look at, the Mike Glennon thing did not work out. The Cody Parkey thing did not work out. As much as he was executive of the year last year, some of the misses that he's had or that have come about because of how long he's been on the job, they've showed their face this year. So I did not think that they would be as healthy as they were last year, and I thought that that's why this team will be around the 10-6 mark, because I thought that they could be just as good a team, but with a worse record because of all the things they went through. They took the ball away 40-some odd times last year, and they had the least man-lost games I believe in the NFL, if not the lowest 5. So there were a lot of things that went the Bears' way, and I think what it did was provide a false sense of security for a lot of these things that they right now are having trouble covering up.
All you got to do is look at the record book and see all the quarterback records taken up by Sid Luckman and Jay Cutler. So you talking about the honeymoon time being over? Hell, we're headed to marriage counseling at this point. It's do or die. I want to get off the current state of the Bears. I want to go down a different route. This show is obviously an homage to my Uncle Doug, someone who played a big role in my professional life. He was a blessing in my personal life. You knew my Uncle Doug. You worked with him. What kind of an impact did he have with you?
Oh man. I think about him every day. Doug is one of the most important people, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life. And when I went to the funeral, it hit me harder than some people that have been in my family. And I'm not ashamed to say it, because Doug and I spent many, many years together, whether it was the Jiggets and Buffone show, whether it was me producing for him on the pregame shows, pre and post-game shows, going in that NBC studio, that NBC Tower office, I should say, and, him bringing a pan and garlic wings and a pack of cigarettes and not being able to smoke in there, and me and him just lighting up and talking football, and him throwing stuff at the TV, and me snatching bottles of dip out of his hand, him thinking it's Coca-Cola because he was just all over the place and just having a good time. Like that was my man, 50 grand. And the last day that I saw him, I'll never forget, it was when I first came back. Well, when I came back to the station. And he was walking out of the studio because he was doing the morning show. I was doing the midday show at that time. I was hosting. I finally got my own show with Speegs, and he's walking out, and he knew how I felt about Kevin White. And he Doug, he was happy to see me. He hugged me, wouldn't let me go. And then the first thing he says to me, he goes, "Buddy, Amari Cooper is the guy, not Kevin White." And I started laughing. And of course, Doug was right. That man is, and everybody who knows me knows this, and it's not from a phony place. That man impacted me in ways that I don't think he'll ever understand. I think Dana understands it because I let her know as much as I possibly can. The twins, Doug Jr., they are, if anything is ever needed of me or from me or by me, they know that I am on call, because that dude, there was a lot of dark days when I was, thinking about giving up and all these other things, because his business would deal you a lot of blows, and that man would out of nowhere drop an email or hit me up or whatever the case may be, and he always looked out. So he is one of the better people. And then the stories that you heard that he didn't even want out there. After he passed, about Doug helping people out and helping funeral arrangements and all those other things, and Doug was an OG. Doug was a salt of the earth kind of dude, a man with a million stories, and all of them were true. He lived 50 lives, man. So I still to this day have the Tribune full page spread on him, and I got it framed in here. And he is, that dude is always going to be one of the more special people I've ever run across, and I appreciate his presence. And I think I'm a better man for having known Doug Buffone. So, he's, I can't say enough about that dude. He was one of the better people in my life.
Couldn't agree with you more. This is a guy that was doing stuff for NFL Films. He was doing his show in Chicago. And when I got my first start in radio, I had a 1 hour show on a 1,000 watt AM station in Western Pennsylvania. And he came on my show every week to talk football, to try to get ratings up, to try to show me how to run an entertaining show. He came on that show every week, and he said, I can give you 5 to 10 minutes. I said, great. We'd be 30 minutes in. I'm like, hey, do you got to go? He's like, nah, let's do another one. So I'll tell you what, he did it because he wanted to. And everything that you say is just, it just brings back brings back those feelings. Now, I've shared some funny Uncle Doug stories on here at times. Do you have any favorite or memorable UD stories that come to mind? Because this is a guy that tried to fertilize his own lawn once and ended up just burning it down to the freaking roots. So, my dad would always say, "Thank God you're a football player because you couldn't do a damn thing other than that," because he wasn't the most handy guy in the world. We can say that.
Doug was a handful, man. All of my Doug stories are always kind of like, oh, Doug, don't do that, kind of vibe. like I said, I've slapped at least 5 dip spit filled bottles out of his hand as he went to go take a drink because he was, mad about the Bears and forgot which Coke bottle was which and which was the dip bottle. So I probably saved Doug from vomiting at least 6-7 times in my life. I saved Doug at the vending machine thousands of times where I would walk past and be like, you're not supposed to be eating that. And then he'd mess around and buy granola in front of me. He probably didn't eat it, but he just did it in front of me. Because, Dana was always on him about what he ate. He was part owner at Gibson's. And when I first started dating my son's mom, I told him about her, and he's like, "Oh, well, you should go over to the restaurant." And so I go, "Okay, cool." And, I got no money. I'm broke. So I take her out and everything's on the house. And, she was like, "This was a good time." I'm like, "Yeah, it's my man, Doug. You hooked us up." And, she thanked Doug. She, at the time, she was a promotions intern. So she saw Doug every once in a while. And, Doug gave her a hug. And then he saw me walking in the hallway and he said, "You, come here." I'm like, "Oh, damn it." Like something happened. And I walk over there and Doug with the straight face, like stone faced killer look in his eyes. I'm like, "Oh, what did I do? Like, did I not tip?" Like, I'm pretty good at that kind of stuff as a young man. My dad always told me how to handle myself in restaurants. So he gets really close to me and, he's got like dip spit on his chin and, he's wearing yesterday's sweater and, wearing some jogging pants that don't go with it with some loafers. And
oh, man.
Smells like an Italian beef and Egyptian musk. And he's like, he's getting closer. And I'm like, Doug's strong as hell. So I'm like,
my God, yeah.
So I'm like, all I got to do is make sure that I stay from inside his framework. If I can get one arm loose, I can maybe, get away from him. Because I'm thinking all this as I'm walking up to him. This is a Bears all-time legend. This is a dude who you don't want to mess with. He's got hands that have killed at least 7 people. I know that for sure. So I'm walking up to him and I'm like, "Hey, Doug, what's going on, man? Ready for the show?" And he goes, "To hell with the show." I'm like, "All right, what's happening?" He goes, "If you ever go to that restaurant and spend as little as you did again," he goes, "you'll never go again." He goes, "I'm not sending you there to get a chicken sandwich or whatever and spend $70. He goes, "If you go there, have a good time. Don't ever do that again." I'm like, "All right." So next time I went, champagne, turtle cake, two 70-ounce steaks. Like I made it happen. And then he laughed the next time he saw me. But I mean, he was one of the kinder, sweeter dudes. And hey, man, sharp as a tack to the very last day. The man kept meticulous notes. He always joked about things that dudes complain about now. That dude was playing in an era where no one was taking care of you medically.
Right.
And he always did it as if he knew there was a worse life that he could have lived. So the things that he was appreciative of, he always kept in the forefront. My mother and father used to tell me, especially my grandmother used to tell me this too, always have something to look forward to every day. Whether it be the smallest things, whether it's a pickup game with your people, a dinner, a drink or two, whatever the case may be, or, playing a board game, hugging your sons, hugging your daughters, whatever. Like wake up and look forward to something every day. And Doug was the epitome of that. Every single day I worked with that dude, I never had a bad day. He was never the reason why work was bad. He was always the reason why things seemed okay, even when they weren't okay. And he had a love for me that I could tell was genuine. So that'll be my man forever and ever.
Just so you know that the tendency to try to drink a dip can is a family trait that's not just Uncle Doug. That runs across the board. So you cannot walk through my grandpa's basement without either knocking over a dip can or someone trying to drink a dip can. That he gets that, honestly. He didn't pick that up in Chicago. He had been doing that in Yatesboro, Pennsylvania since the 1960s. I guarantee it. One more question for you, Jason Goff, here on Buffone 55. Before I turn it over to the chat room real quick, I do want to say that I really miss his post-game shows, not just because of his passion, but because I could envision him going off on those same rants in front of the family when he'd come home for deer camp, talking about those GD Bears and they're going to put me in an early grave, and talking about, because he was passionate off the air just as much as he was on the air. What do you think Uncle Doug would be saying about this current Bears team?
Oh, my God. Especially this last performance. There would be some very fine-tuned, colorful words. We'd probably be in a bar somewhere in Algonquin, so he'd be getting the backing from the entire crowd who just want blood anyway. Doug was quite the showman. Like Doug played to the crowd, but he also had his stats and he also had his data up to par, and he watched every angle of the game that you could possibly watch. But this would not be a good week if you were a Bears player or organizational member. That was the other thing, too. That organization has heard everything that everyone has ever had to say about them. The one person who always said how he felt and still remained respected by the organization, by the people in charge, was Doug Buffone. There are a lot of people who have had their access cut off from bad-mouthing the Bears when they did deserve it, sometimes when they didn't deserve it. But Doug Buffone was always had that respect from everybody, football lifers, current, contemporaries, peers, nationwide too. Doug Buffone was a voice for people and an insight and a window, because his soul was Chicago Bears. There was not a put on. He lived it. He died with it. The man understood and appreciated those colors and that organization, and just wanted them to win. He wanted to see a Super Bowl win outside of the '85 Bears before he left. That was, in the Miami game against the Indianapolis. I mean, I was around him for this entire run. And he was, there was nobody more proud when the Bears did well than Doug Buffone. There was nobody angrier than when the Bears did poorly than Doug Buffone. But Doug's love affair with that team in this city is unlike any other. And it's still a special relationship to this day, because whenever Doug's birthday rolls around or his untimely passing, whatever the case may be, I'll always shout his name, because he deserves to be. Every time you see those Buckus tackles, please believe 55 was someone taking the brunt of the punishment so that somebody can make the play. He is everything that you wanted in a teammate and a gentleman, and I appreciate him. From Walter Payton to Jim McMahon, to everybody in the 90s, anybody that man came in touch. Olin Kreutz still respects him to this day. Anybody that came in touch with Doug, they knew who Doug was and what he stood for. So there are a few guys who are attached to an organization the way Doug was, and I think the Bears and the city were better off for having him around.
I appreciate those words. We're talking to Jason Goff here on Buffone 55. Before I cut you loose, Jason, Alyssa, I know you've been interacting with people in the chat room. Any quick questions for Jason before we let him go?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick questions. I love those, some great stuff, you guys. Loved hearing all of those stories. He's really good. So, Jason, do you think that the Raiders were taking any cheap shots at some of the Bears? There was some video of Richie Incognito chop blocking Eddie Goldman. Do you think they took any cheap shots?
The chop block was a little touch and go. I got to be honest with you, though. I mean, the Bears got pushed around. The Bears got lightweight punked this game. They got played in the phone booth, and they didn't come out the victor. That game was played within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage the entire day. There wasn't a whole bunch of long drop backs. They were getting punched in the mouth and moved off that football. The Bears played maybe 10 good minutes of football, maybe, that third quarter. And they got set up with excellent field position a couple of times, the Tariq Cohen punt return and also the botched toss sweep with Josh Jacobs going the wrong way and Derek Carr tossing the ball. But the Bears got pushed around. Nick Williams was on skates. Eddie Goldman was on skates. Richie Incognito, Gabe Jackson, and Rodney Hudson had the best interior 3 game that I've seen against this Bears defense, period. And that's better than the Saquon Barkley game, because Saquon is just he's superhuman. That game was ridiculous. You saw him putting on like one of the best running backs to play the game. Josh Jacobs is going to be a really, really good player, and he was a bowling ball out there, and he took it to the Bears secondary, but he got to the second level quite often untouched. There was one game, and there was one play in the fourth quarter too where he lost. Should have been a 2-yard loss and ended up a 3-yard gain. I was like, okay, this is what you see. What happens when guys are fatigued and guys have been pushed around for 4 quarters. So Richie Incognito always plays on the edge. There were a couple of plays maybe, but in the end, if they ain't calling it, you still got to play it, because referees ain't gonna save you in a game like that. That was an old school. I mean, hell, they had a formation where they had 2 tight ends, an eligible tackle, and a fullback and a heavy set on 3rd and 1, and they threw a bootleg tight end drag. I mean, they did anything they wanted to because of their physical dominance on the line of scrimmage. The Bears were in 3rd and longs most of the game offensively, seemingly. That's what it seemed like. And the Raiders were in 3rd and mediums to 3rd and short. So I don't want to hear about cheap shots. Take it out on the field. It's the only sport where if somebody gets you, you have the next, few plays in that series to not only get them back, but punch them in the mouth. And Richie Incognito exerted his will. Rodney Hudson did. Gabe Jackson did. Trent Brown did a hell of a job on Khalil Mack. They won at the line of scrimmage. They beat them playing old school football. So, if there were cheap shots, you're going to have to chalk that up because it came in an L. Talking about cheap shots in an L, I want to hear about refs in an L. I don't want to hear about cheap shots in an L. Maybe you could talk to me about those in a win, and usually you don't. I don't want to. Nothing else can be blamed on the fact that they were tougher than the Bears, whether the Bears were tired or whatever the case may be. They were tougher than the Bears.
So earlier in the interview, you name dropped Cody Parkey, which that didn't go over well. But What are your thoughts on Eddie Pinheiro and what he's bringing to as the Bears kicker to the Bears special teams?
Eddie P's been fine, right? 8 out of 9 was all 9 PATs. He went down after one of those. I think it was the second touchdown they scored after the PAT, if I'm not mistaken. He still got that pinched nerve situation, so he's obviously still hobbled, but he's been fine. Listen, don't leave it up to the kicker. That's how I see it. If you're going to talk to me about your high-flying offense, you got all these Q formations, that means I'm getting 24, 25 plus out of you, right? If I told you the Bears would have gave up 17 points and had 21-17 lead with their defense out there with 97 yards to go, you tell me the Bears are going to win the game, right? So the Bears defense get pushed around. I can't put it, and you weren't putting on the kicker, but he's been fine. Eddie Pinheiro is the only person that should be able to sleep at night right now. Other than that, everybody's got work to do, because it's different when nobody's scared of you again. People were scared of the Bears at the end of the last season, and then this season with all the build up leading up to it, and then you get out there, and in 5 weeks you've had mixed results. So it's gotten back to, okay, we don't have to be scared of the Bears. Prove to us you can beat us. Prove to us that you're not locking in on Allen Robinson when you get a little itchy back there, Mitch. Prove to us that you can run the football. Prove to us that, Ha-Ha Clinton Dix is as good as Adrian Amos. Prove to us, over and over these things. It's not, if I can chip and double Khalil Mack as much as I need to, and I think the injury to Hakeem Hicks is huge because, Hakeem Hicks came back for a quarter and dislocated his elbow. And you saw that all the things you thought Nick Williams and Nick Kwiatkowski were last week, all of a sudden you were wishing for Hakeem Nicks to be out there again. So, they're injured. So now, they got some proving to do. Every week you got to prove yourself. And the last couple of weeks, the Washington Redskins are not going to scare anybody. I mean, look how people are talking about the Cowboys. Cowboys beat 3 bad teams and lost to 2 decent ones. So now people are like, all right, the Cowboys ain't as good as we thought they would be. That's how people are looking at the Bears right now. You're going to tell me the 49ers are the best team in the NFC? Who's the best team in the NFC right now? This is a conference that I feel like is up for grabs, and that's why that loss in London is so big. It's huge. So long story less long, I got no problem with Eddie Pinheiro right now.
I got one last one for you. So you shared so many great stories about Doug Buffone. Is there another memory that you didn't mention before that you want to leave us with?
Oh, man. Memory of Doug. I don't know. Doug used to pick out a different brother every week that I look like.
That's so on brand.
Yeah. Every week. At one time, I was like, "You're out of your." I almost cursed. One week, I'm like, "All right, Doug, it's enough coffee for you. Sit your ass down and let's do the show." One week it was Michael Vick. When I was younger and didn't have the eating habits that I have now. When the Bears got Martellus Bennett, it was Martellus Bennett. I'll never forget one week he walked up to me and he said, "Hey, buddy, it's been troubling me." I'm like, "Uh-oh, which ugly dude is he gonna say I look like now?" And he goes, "You look, your personality and your whole vibe is like." And I'm like, "Who, Doug?" And he goes, "That Will Smith." And I'm like, "Doug, get in the damn studio, Doug."
There you go.
We're not going to have the Jason Goff, Will Smith conversation because there's nothing outside of both of us being African-American that is remotely like each other. The man has a chiseled body. He looks like he's 24 years old at 52, and he's got $700 million and a beautiful wife and family. I'm hosting overnights and hoping to pay my rent, which is $700 a month at the time. So get back in the studio and leave me alone, old man. So every week it was a different brother that he picked out that he thought I looked like. But that was Doug, man. He was always trying to lift your spirits, even if they were ridiculous, ways of lifting your spirits. But that was my guy. He always kept me on my toes. I never knew. And because of Doug, I have an acute sense for any time a Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra song comes on. Like, I lose it. And amongst all my black friends, they look at me like, "Hey, man, everything good?" I'm like, no, you don't understand. There's a special relationship that I have with these songs. No one can belt out Moon River with my complexion the way I can because of Doug Buffone. So, yeah, Doug kept me on my toes and kept me abreast of the things that I should be as a young man.
That stuff was playing in my cradle, man. That's going to be burned in my head for the rest of my life, and I'm glad. Jason Goff, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. Before we cut you loose, tell people how they can listen to your stuff, read your stuff, and interact with you on social media.
Oh, man. Don't follow me on Twitter unless you want to fight. At Jason1Goff. I'm just joking. I don't fight anymore. It's not. It doesn't help the bank account. At Jason1Goff on Twitter, on Instagram. You can hear me Monday through Fridays on Sirius XM channel 372, 6 to 9 a.m. Central, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Big Ten this morning. Big Ten Radio. Twice a week on Spain and Company from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio. And coming up here very soon, maybe in the next 3 or 4 days, we'll have some new developments on where you can actually see me on a very, very consistent basis. So got some good news coming up here at the start of the basketball season. So I'll wait for that, but you guys will be the first to know as soon as it happens.
Oh, there's a teaser there. You make sure you follow him on social media, figure out where we're going to be able to see Goff. Oh, man.
We've been putting it together over the last week or so, and I've been telling my new employer, like, "Hey, it wasn't me. I didn't say anything. This is everyone else. These are the same people who were digging and investigating the last time something happened." So I'm like, "All right, do your thing. It's not me." But there's some new things on the horizon that I'm really, really looking forward to, new challenges and, another revenue stream so my child can eat organic peanut butter.
Can't wait to see where or when you're going to be at. I love listening to you. I love interacting with you. I want to thank you so much. Jason Goff, thank you again for being on. We'll talk to you down the road.
Always love, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
We'll return right after this quick message.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alec Lifshos, a.k.a. Trey Busy, and I'm here to have a conversation with you guys about mental health. A lot of times in our communities, we don't talk about mental health enough, and it goes under the radar as a reoccurring issue. So I took the liberty to create the Let's Talk It Out podcast. This podcast was created to break the silence on mental health issues and to give a voice to those suffering. I have conversations with professionals in the mental health field as well as those who are suffering, and we break down different ways to stump stigmas and ways to cope with mental health conditions. The show is broadcasted live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Mixlr.com/LTIO podcast. That's MIXLR.com/LTIO podcast. If you can't make the live recording of the podcast, then you can find the podcast available to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Give the podcast a follow on Twitter and Instagram at LTI Podcast on both platforms. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the future.
We now return to our program.
So, John, that music signifies one thing. It is time for the second half of our B55 questions. So that was just a fantastic interview. All of those wonderful stories that you discussed with Jason about your Uncle Doug. What was that like, just kind of rehashing that again?
I'll be honest, it made me a little emotional. Thinking about the impact that he had on other people's lives, thinking about the impact he had on my life, thinking about the stories that I would hear about him before he was born, about how he was driving out to deer camp in Pennsylvania one time and his car broke down, so he got a test car from a local auto dealership and just drove the temporary plates the whole way from Illinois to Pennsylvania and didn't even get pulled over. So I love rehashing that stuff. I love talking to people that knew my Uncle Doug, and obviously Jason knew him really well, worked with him for a long time. So I appreciate his time, but I also really appreciate his words. So that was great. I really appreciate that.
So we're going to get back to what your Uncle Doug would have loved, and we're talking some Bears football.
Excellent. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So Rick Morrissey of the Chicago Sun-Times wrote that the 2019 Bears are giving fans whiplash. Quote, "The team's identity is exactly what its record suggests it is. That of a group that has some good days and some bad days. This season was supposed to be about highs, not lows. That's why there have been more angst about the Bears than normal." End quote. So Morrissey goes on to write that he feels that we're looking at an 8-8 team. What's your gut saying? And can you please say that your gut, please have your gut say it in 55 seconds.
Well, what I'm seeing is a fledgling offense that gets bailed out by a superior defense. And what happens if the defense doesn't have a superior performance? Well, you lose to the Raiders, even though the Raiders gave you every opportunity to win the game. I see uncertainty at the quarterback position. Trubisky, injury aside, is he getting any better by not playing right now? I don't think so. So overall, I see a bunch of uncertainty, something I didn't think was going to be a big issue 5 games into the season. That makes me a little uneasy. They're still in the mix for the division, but it's weird to feel like the Bears are at a teetering point already. They can fall one of two ways. Do they come out of the bye week with a resurgence and start ripping off wins and putting up points with a new philosophy and game plans? Or do we continue to see this being strictly a defensive team that tries to keep the game close and eke out maybe 4 or 5 more wins? So I am interested to see how they look on October 20th against the Saints at home, because that'll be a real indicator on whether this is a 7-win team or a 10 or 11-win team.
And it's unfair to make comparisons to last season, but it does kind of feel a little bit like last season. But, now we need to see, is this a team that can do what it did last season and kind of rip off, 9 wins out of the last 10, which, their schedule is much more difficult. They have games against the Saints, the Eagles, the Chargers, and the Lions, who are actually a force. Look at that. So we'll see if they can pull it out.
Well, the expectations are completely different. This team wasn't even supposed to have a winning record last year, and they won 12 games. Now, they were supposed to win 12 games, and there's an entirely different amount of pressure on them now.
And obviously the offense is a big part of that pressure. So the Bears might have some answers to the questions plaguing the team's offensive woes on their roster. So Cordero Patterson has averaged 6.5 yards per touch. Javon Wims has 4 catches for 56 yards against the Vikings a week ago, but he was only targeted once on Sunday against the Raiders. Rashad Coward performed admirably a week ago against Washington at right guard. Do you think any of these players, or are there others that deserve to see more playing time and in some cases become the starter at their respective position? You've got 55 ticks.
Well, Cordero Patterson should probably get more touches, but he's also the specialty guy. I can't imagine him starting at running back or receiver. It is interesting because it seems like Tariq Cohen was the Cordero Patterson last year, and now you have to decide on how to use both of them. They can both catch it well. They're both blazing fast. They both return kicks. They both take handoffs out of the backfield. So it will be interesting to see how they're both used and if they're on the field at the same time a little bit more. With Wims, he's incredibly talented, but the ball isn't getting spread around enough. So who's to say if an elevated position in the offense would really benefit him or the team. As for Coward, I'm willing to try anything on the offensive line right now, and I'll tell you this, reportedly Alex Bars turned down an offer with the Patriots to stay with the Bears practice squad. So maybe he thinks his future is pretty bright with the Bears. Maybe he's been privy to some information that we don't have. Maybe the offensive line gets a shot of energy during the bye week, and maybe we see some new faces injected into the rotation. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination the Bears are in desperation mode, but they need to do something now because you don't want to start addressing things when you're 3 games under 500.
And I'm with you about the offensive line. I feel like that's the area where they need to address it. And the question is, are they going to? Because obviously Kyle Long, I mean, he looks like he's near the end, and then you have obviously Leno is just kind of frustrating. And, Coward did perform admirably. And then, do they make a change? And speaking about Alex Bars, is he, could they elevate him even sooner than they were going to? So I guess we'll see what they do with that offensive line. But they need to get things fixed.
I would expect changes, and I expect them probably coming out of the bye week.
And so speaking of that bye week, one of the things that the Bears could be doing during the bye week is inquiring about players who might be available for trade. Although Washington Redskins president Bruce Allen says their holdout, left tackle Trent Williams, is not available for trade, do you think Pace should still make the call to see if they could get Williams? Or do you have faith that Charles Leno will iron out his issues? Double nickels on the clock. Go.
Well, that sounds nice, and obviously Trent Williams would be a welcome addition, but there are some issues with this fantasy scenario. One being he's only under contract until the end of next year, and I can only assume that he would want an extension. I hear his beef is with Washington's medical staff, but I'm sure he would want to shore up his future as well. He's 31 years old, due to make $12.5 million next year. If you sign him, how is he going to affect the cap eventually? It's not like the Bears are operating on a cheap budget for the offensive line right now. $30 million for Bobby Massey, $37 million for Leno, $51 million for Whitehair, a new $12 million 2-year contract for Kyle Long. James Daniels, luckily, is still on his rookie deal, but that's over $130 million invested in the line. So are they just going to start throwing money at money? And also, what would you be giving up in this trade? Are the Bears going to be content with never having another high draft pick? I mean, for a really good 31-year-old left tackle, are you going to give up a future first rounder, a second rounder? So maybe if you truly feel like you're in a win now situation, you go all in like the Rams did last year. But I don't know, that there's a lot of things moving in that.
And you're speaking about all that money that they've doled out on that line. I feel like that's one of the most frustrating parts is that, obviously they struggled a little bit last year with the run game, but they were solid last season and they've paid these guys. So they should expect consistency out of them. And that's been obviously something that's been lacking. Not
getting a big return on the investment as of right now.
Definitely not. So Coach Nagy said that the coaching staff was devoting time this week to self-scout their tendencies. So help them out, John. Scout the team's coaching staff and their players through the 5 games and do it in 55 seconds.
Well, we're going to see what this staff is made of coming out of the bye week. Things got smoother as the season went along last year, but for some reason, this kind of feels different. It feels like there are some things that need serious reformulating. So how is Highstand going to fix this line? What's he going to do to open up some running lanes? What are Nagy and Helfrich going to do to adapt the offense so it's more effective? How are they going to take Trubisky to the next level and do it fast? How are they going to get the run game going? How do you get more receivers involved? For Chuck Pagano, well, not much you really have to do other than make sure your guys get healthy, but definitely look over the Raiders game and figure out why their line was able to push yours around, because I'm sure other teams are going to try to copy that and replicate that kind of success. So that's why I keep talking about October 20th, and I say it's gonna show us a lot. If you're using this weekend to assess and tinker, the product of that will show itself against the Saints. If it's more of the same, that's a little concerning. So this will definitely show how well this staff is good, how good they are at recognizing and fixing problems on the fly.
Exactly. And like you said, Pagano, the defense was bound to have one of those games. So obviously there are no issues. Well, not no issues, but there's no really concern with the defense here. It's going to be this offensive staff really needs to take a look, and they need to start figuring this thing out.
Yeah, something needs to change, but obviously they got to look over a lot of what their tendencies are.
Absolutely. So it's time to the Buffone booth. So barflies worldwide are glum, and there's no one better qualified here at the bar room than you, John, to raise their spirits. So the clock is off. John, cheer me up.
All right. Well, barflies, I know that last loss hurt. I know things aren't exactly high flying like we had anticipated. But let's break down the season a little bit. The Bears have a winning record. They're a game out of first place in the division. Things are still in pretty good shape. The Bears were 3-2 last year, and then they lost to the Patriots, which put them at 3-3, and then they rattled off 5 straight wins and only lost 1 more game throughout the entire year. So, there is still plenty of reason for hope. There is still a great opportunity to win this division. The Bears are a good football team. We're only worried about this because the expectations were a lot higher going into this year. But this team can still win a bunch of ball games, and they can certainly make the playoffs. This bye week isn't just for the players and coaches to recharge. I encourage all Bears fans to do the same. Look at this season as a long-term marathon and realize things are going to be just fine. Once again, I want to greatly thank Jason Goff for being our guest tonight. Remember to follow me on Twitter at JD Buffone. Also, make sure you're following the Bar Room at Bears Bar Room and like the Facebook page. Alyssa, tell our listeners where they can find your work and contact you on social media.
You can find my work over at bearswire.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Alyssa Barbieri. I also want to tell those listening to us live on Mixlr.com that in just a few minutes, we've got 2 more shows coming up. Fantasy Football Goon with Joe Mandel and John Santucci follows. They will welcome fantasy football legend Spaceball, and the 3 will get you prepped for Week 6. That's followed by Shy Fans in the Stands with Greg Braggs and Joey Two Scoops. Their guests tonight include Bears superfan Terrence Young, who was in London for the game, along with Greg, and they should have some super fun stories to share. So those 2 shows, along with this one, will be available in podcast format. So make sure you subscribe to the Bears Barroom Radio Network.
That's right, and sign up on our Mixlr.com channel for email updates on all of our live shows. We'd love to have you in our chat room, and it's all absolutely free to sign up for. We hope you join us live and interact. And if you listen to the podcast version, please leave us a review. That helps us out immensely. But that will do it for us this week. Enjoy the bye week, everyone. We'll see you next time.